Hey everyone! Today we're diving into the interesting history of the Qing Dynasty, the last imperial dynasty of China. It all started in 1636 when the Manchus, led by Nurhaci, declared the formation of this new dynasty in Shenyang. By 1644, they had seized control of Beijing, marking the beginning of their rule. This dynasty lasted until 1912, ending with the Xinhai Revolution. Before the Qing Dynasty, there was the Ming Dynasty, and after its fall, the Republic of China took over. The Qing Dynasty was known for being a multi-ethnic empire and played a significant role in shaping modern China. At its peak, it was the largest dynasty in China's history, and by 1790, the fourth largest empire in the world by land area. By 1907, the population had grown to over 426 million. Making it the most populous country globally at that time. The roots of the Qing dynasty trace back to Nurhaci, who unified the Jurchen clans, later known as the Manchus, and founded the later Qing dynasty in 1616. His son, Hong Taiji, became the first emperor of the Great Qing in 1636. As the Ming dynasty weakened, the Qing took the opportunity to seize Beijing with the help of a Ming general. They overcame the peasant rebels who had captured the Ming capital and established their rule under the Shunzi emperor. However, the Qing didn't have complete control right away. It took until 1683 to fully consolidate power due to resistance from remaining Ming loyalists and internal rebellions like the Revolt of the Three Feudatories. Under the leadership of the Kangxi emperor, the Qing dynasty strengthened its control and embraced Confucian values, patronized Buddhism, and encouraged scholarship, population, and economic growth. The Qing also maintained a complex relationship with neighboring countries like Korea and Vietnam, asserting their superiority while expanding their influence into regions like Tibet, Mongolia, and Xinjiang. The dynasty reached its peak during the reign of the Qianlong Emperor from 1735 to 1796, known as the High Qing era. Qianlong led military campaigns and supported cultural projects. However, after his death, the dynasty faced many challenges including internal revolts, economic troubles, corruption, and increasing pressure from foreign powers. Defeats in wars like the Opium Wars forced the Qing to sign unequal treaties, granting trading privileges and other concessions to Western powers. Major uprisings such as the Taiping Rebellion and the Dungan Revolt caused immense suffering and loss of life. In the 1860s, the Tungji Restoration attempted to reform and modernize the military and government. Despite efforts like the self-strengthening movement, which aimed to adopt Western technology, the Qing continued to face setbacks. The defeat in the First Sino-Japanese War in 1895 resulted in the loss of Taiwan and influence over Korea. An ambitious reform effort in 1898, known as the 100 Days Reform, was quickly reversed by the powerful Empress Dowager Cixi. The anti-foreign Boxer Rebellion in 1900 further weakened the Qing as foreign powers retaliated and imposed harsh penalties. In response, the Qing government attempted significant reforms, including establishing a new legal code and holding elections. Debates raged between revolutionaries like Sun Yat-sen and reformists over how to modernize China. Following the deaths of key figures like the Guangxu Emperor and Empress Dowager Cixi, the court's conservative faction resisted further change, alienating many and leading to the Wuchang Uprising on October 10, 1911. This uprising sparked the Xinhai Revolution, which ultimately led to the abdication of the last Qing emperor, Xuantong, on February 12, 1912. Although there was a brief attempt to restore the dynasty in 1917, it was never recognized by the Republic of China or the international community. Interestingly, the Qing dynasty wasn't founded by the Han Chinese majority, but by the Manchus, descendants of the Jurchens who lived in what is now northeast China. Contrary to some misconceptions, the Manchus were not nomads but a farming people. And the story of the Qing dynasty begins with Nurhaci, the leader of a small Jurchen tribe called the Aisin Gioro, located in Jinzhou in the early 17th century. Nurhaci, who was fluent in Chinese and Mongolian and familiar with Chinese classics like Romance of the Three Kingdoms and Water Margin, started his rise to power in 1582. Initially a vassal of the Ming emperors, he saw himself as a protector of the Ming border. In 1616, after consolidating his power among the Jurchen tribes, he declared himself Khan of the later Qing Dynasty, referencing a previous Jurchen-ruled dynasty. By 1600, Nurhaci had outlined the 7 grievances against the Ming, renouncing their authority and continuing his campaign to unify the Jurchen tribes under his rule. Following a series of successful battles, he moved his capital from Etu Ala to larger cities in Liaodong, first to Liaoyang in 1621 and then to Shenyang in 1625. He forged a crucial alliance with the Qurchen Mongols, cementing it through intermarriage while subduing those who resisted through military force. When Nurhaci died in 1626, his son Hong Taiji took over. Despite facing initial setbacks, such as a defeat by the Ming in 1627 due to their new Portuguese cannons, Hong Taiji adapted by creating his own artillery corps with help from defected Chinese metallurgists. In November 1635, he officially adopted the name Manchu for his people, and in 1636, he was declared Emperor of the Great Qing by the nobility of Inner Mongolia, Manchu leaders, and Han officials. He changed the state's name from Great Jin to Great Qing and began to exhibit imperial ambitions beyond merely unifying Manchu territories. Hong Taiji invaded Korea again in 1636 and established a basic bureaucratic system modeled after the Ming administration, setting up 6 ministries to manage finance, personnel, rights, military, punishments, and public works. Initially, these bodies had limited influence, but they grew in importance as the Qing conquest progressed. Hong Taiji also implemented significant changes in policy towards Han Chinese. While Nurhaci had differentiated between Han based on their grain wealth and enacted harsh measures against them following a revolt in 1623, Hong Taiji recognized the need to attract Han Chinese to his cause. He integrated many Han, including surrendered Ming officials, into the Jurchen nation as full citizens obligated to provide military service. After Hong Taiji's sudden death in September 1643, the Qing faced a leadership crisis. With no clear succession system in place, the contenders for power were Hong Taiji's oldest son Huge and his half-brother Dorgan. A compromise was reached, and Hong Taiji's 5-year-old son, Fulin, was installed as the Shunzi emperor, with Dorgan acting as regent and the de facto leader. Meanwhile, the Ming Dynasty was crumbling under internal conflicts, fiscal problems, and peasant rebellions. They failed to take advantage of the Qing succession turmoil. In April 1644, the rebel leader Li Zicheng sacked Beijing, marking the end of the Ming Dynasty as the last Ming emperor, Chongjin, committed suicide. Li Zicheng then led his forces to confront Wu Songui at Xinhai Pass, a key defense point of the Great Wall. Faced with the choice between a larger rebel army and the familiar Manchus, Wu Songui chose to ally with the Manchus, partly due to Li Zicheng's mistreatment of officials and possibly personal grievances. Wu and Dorgan joined forces and defeated Li Zicheng's army on May 27, 1644. The Allied forces captured Beijing on June 6, 1644, and the Shunzi Emperor was declared the Son of Heaven on October 30th. The Manchus, positioning themselves as the rightful successors to the Ming by defeating Li Zicheng, held a formal funeral for the Chongjin Emperor to complete the symbolic transition. However, it took another 17 years to conquer the rest of China proper, battling Ming loyalists and other rebels. The Qing strategically welcomed defectors from the Ming military, promising them respect and positions within the 8 banners. By 1648, Han Chinese made up the majority of the 8 banners, with ethnic Manchus becoming a minority. This multi-ethnic force, armed with gunpowder weapons, was crucial in the conquest of Ming China. Key Han bannermen like Shang Kexi, Ging Dongming and Kong Yu played significant roles, later governing southern China as viceroys. To promote ethnic harmony, a 1600 decree allowed Han Chinese men to marry Manchu women, though these policies changed later. During the early years of Shunzi's reign, Dorgan held significant power, ruling in the emperor's name and reducing the influence of rival Manchu princes. He also decided to keep Beijing as the capital, reappointing many Ming officials to stabilize the regime quickly. However, some of Dorgan's policies, like the 1600 haircutting order, were controversial. This edict forced Han Chinese men to adopt the Manchu hairstyle or face death, leading to resistance and unrest. Dorgan's rule ended abruptly when he died on December 31, 1650. Despite his significant contributions, his legacy was tarnished posthumously. He was stripped of his titles, and his body was desecrated. The Shunzi emperor's promising reign was cut short by his death from smallpox in 1661, at the age of 24. He was succeeded by his third son, Xuanye, who would become the renowned Kangxi emperor. Under Kangxi, the Qing continued to consolidate power. Han bannermen fought fiercely against Ming loyalists like Koxinga and Fujian, leading to harsh measures such as the evacuation of coastal populations to deprive the rebels of resources. And the Kangxi emperor's reign was the longest of any Chinese emperor, lasting 61 years and marking the start of the High Qing era, a period of significant social, economic, and military power. The Qing dynasty's stability was founded on two key pillars: the adoption of bureaucratic institutions and Neo-Confucian culture from previous dynasties, and their inner Asian identity, which appealed to their diverse subjects, including Mongols, Tibetans, and Muslims. Manchu rulers and Han Chinese scholars gradually reached an understanding, with the examination system providing a pathway for Han Chinese to become officials. The Kangxi Dictionary and the Sacred Edict of 1670 demonstrated the Qing's respect for Confucian learning and values. However, attempts to discourage foot-binding among Chinese women were unsuccessful. The Qing rulers also maintained their Manchu identity, appealing to their inner Asian subjects by using various titles such as Huangdi, Emperor, in Chinese and Manchu, and Bogda Khan among the Mongols. The Qianlong Emperor even portrayed himself as a Buddhist sage ruler to appease Mongol and Tibetan subjects. Kangxi ascended to the throne at the age of 7, with 4 regents appointed to prevent the concentration of power seen under Dorgan. However, a boy, the junior regent, gradually amassed significant power. In 1669, the young Kangxi successfully imprisoned a boy, marking a significant victory for the 15-year-old emperor. Kangxi faced significant challenges, including the revolt of the 3 feudatories, which lasted for 8 years. 3 Ming generals, granted governorships in southern China, became increasingly autonomous. Kangxi unified his forces and, by 1681, regained control over a devastated southern China. He also led military campaigns against the Zhengers in Outer Mongolia, incorporating these regions into the empire after defeating Gurdan. In 1683, Kangxi's forces received the surrender of Taiwan from Zheng Xuang, Koxinga's grandson. This allowed Qing forces to focus on the far eastern outpost of Albazin, leading to the 1689 Treaty of Nerchinsk with Russia, which maintained a peaceful border for nearly 2 centuries. After Gurdan's death, Kangxi dispatched armies to Lhasa, installing a Dalai Lama sympathetic to the Qing. Following Kangxi's death in 1722, his 4th son, Prince Yong, became the Yongzheng Emperor. Yongzheng, described as severe yet capable, tackled the problems left by his father. He promoted Confucian orthodoxy, cracked down on unorthodox sects, and expanded the palace memorial system, which allowed direct reports to the throne. Yongzheng created a grand council of personal advisors and filled key positions with officials dependent on his patronage. He enforced tax collection rigorously, addressing financial crises and using increased revenues for local improvements. Yongzheng also dealt with diplomatic and strategic issues, solidifying a treaty with Russia and handling threats from the Zhonghars and Miao chieftains. Despite draining the treasury, these campaigns established his control over the military. When Yongzheng died in 1735, his son, Prince Bao, became the Qianlong Emperor. Qianlong expanded the empire's control into Xinjiang and Mongolia, suppressed revolts, and launched cultural projects like the complete library of the four treasuries. However, his later years were marked by corruption and neglect, particularly under his favorite, Heshen, who became one of the most corrupt officials in Qing history. Qianlong's son, the Jiaqing Emperor, eventually forced Heshen to commit suicide. Population growth in the 18th century, fueled by the introduction of new crops like potatoes and peanuts, led to increased pressure on land resources. Despite prohibitions, Han Chinese migrated into Manchuria, seeking arable land. In 1796, the White Lotus Rebellion broke out, fueled by discontent with corrupt officials and poor governance. The rebellion, along with uprisings by Muslims and Miao tribesmen, lasted until 1804, exposing the dynasty's internal weaknesses. At the start of the dynasty, the Chinese Empire remained the dominant power in East Asia. Although there was no formal Ministry of Foreign Relations, the Lifan Yuan handled relations with the Mongols and Tibetans in Inner Asia. The tributary system, a set of customs and institutions inherited from the Ming Dynasty, theoretically governed relations with East and Southeast Asian countries. The Treaty of Nerchinsk in 1689 stabilized relations with Tsarist Russia. However, the 18th century saw the rise of European empires, driven by maritime trade, colonial extraction, and technological advances. The Qing Dynasty was confronted with new concepts of international relations and state-to-state diplomacy. European trading posts expanded into territorial control in India and Indonesia. In response, the Qing established the Canton system in 1756, restricting maritime trade to Guangzhou and granting monopoly trading rights to private Chinese merchants. The British and Dutch East India Companies operated under similar monopoly rights granted by their governments. In 1793, the British East India Company, supported by the British government, sent a diplomatic mission led by Lord George Macartney to China to open trade on an equal basis. The Qing court, viewing trade as secondary, rebuffed the British overtures. The Qianlong Emperor famously told Macartney that China had no need for European goods, as it had everything it required. The trade imbalance, where Europe paid for Chinese goods with silver, troubled Britain and France. The growing Chinese demand for opium provided a solution, and the British East India Company expanded opium production in Bengal. The Daoguang Emperor, alarmed by the silver outflow and the opium epidemic, ordered Lin Zhechu to end the opium trade. In 1839, Lin confiscated opium stocks without compensation, prompting Britain to send a military expedition the following year. The First Opium War exposed the outdated state of the Chinese military. The Qing Navy, composed of wooden sailing junks, was outclassed by the British Royal Navy's modern tactics and firepower. British soldiers, armed with advanced muskets and artillery, easily defeated Qing forces. The Qing surrender in 1842 led to the Treaty of Nanjing, the first of the unequal treaties. It imposed war reparations, opened 5 treaty ports to Western trade and missionaries, and ceded Hong Kong Island to Britain. This revealed Qing weaknesses and sparked rebellions against the regime. The mid-19th century saw the Taiping Rebellion, the first major anti-Manchu uprising. Led by Hong Shouchuan, a failed civil service candidate influenced by Christian teachings, the rebellion became the bloodiest civil war of all time, resulting in 20 to 30 million deaths over 14 years. Hong, proclaiming himself the younger brother of Jesus Christ, established the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. Despite early successes and radical reforms, internal conflicts, defections, and corruption weakened the Taipings. The Qing, aided by British and French troops, eventually crushed the rebellion in 1864. The Qing faced other revolts, including the Miao Rebellion, the Panthay Rebellion, and the Dungan Revolt. Western powers, dissatisfied with the Treaty of Nanjing, supported the Qing during the Taiping and Nian rebellions to secure their interests. China's income plummeted as wars devastated farmland, claimed millions of lives, and necessitated raising and equipping vast armies. In 1854, Britain sought to renegotiate the Treaty of Nanjing, aiming for greater commercial access and a permanent embassy in Beijing. The Arrow Incident in 1856, where Qing authorities boarded a ship flying the British flag, led to the Second Opium War. The 1858 Treaty of Tianjin contained clauses deeply insulting to the Chinese, including demands for official documents in English and unrestricted British access to Chinese rivers. In 1860, with Anglo-French forces advancing on Beijing, the emperor fled to the Imperial hunting lodge at Rea. The Anglo-French forces looted and burned the old summer palace in retaliation for the torture and execution of an English diplomatic mission. Prince Gong, acting as the emperor's proxy, was forced to sign the Convention of Beijing. The humiliated emperor died the following year at Rea. Yet, despite the earlier defeats, the Qing Dynasty managed to rally and fight back. During the reign of the Tungji Emperor, who took the throne at just 5 years old in 1861, a wave of restoration efforts emerged. This period, known as the Tungji Restoration, was spearheaded by Chinese generals and officials who were determined to revive and strengthen the dynasty. They aimed to integrate Western military technology while preserving traditional Confucian values. Key figures in this movement included Zheng Gofan and Prince Gong, who supported younger reformers like Li Hongzhang. These reformers embarked on what became known as the self-strengthening movement. Their efforts included major institutional reforms. China saw the creation of its first unified Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Zhongli Yumin. Foreign diplomats were permitted to reside in the capital. The Imperial Maritime Customs Service was established. Modernized armies, like the Beiyang Army, and a new navy were formed, and Europe was tapped for armament factories to equip China with advanced weaponry. Despite these strides, the Qing dynasty struggled to maintain control over its peripheral territories. In return for support against the British and French, Russia gained large tracts of territory in the northeast in 1860. Cooperation with European powers came to an abrupt end with the Tianjin Massacre of 1870, which erupted after the murder of French nuns, incited by local French diplomats' provocations. In Southeast Asia, France expanded its influence through the Cochinchina Campaign of 1858. By 1883, France had full control over Indochina and reached the Chinese border. The Sino-French War started when the French launched a surprise attack on the Chinese fleet at Fuzhou. Although the French invasion of Taiwan was repelled and they were defeated in Tonkin at the Battle of Bangbo, the threat of Japanese involvement, due to the Gapsun coup in Korea, pressured China into negotiating. The war concluded in 1885 with the Treaty of Tianjin, which recognized the French protectorate in Vietnam. In the late 19th century, tensions with Japan grew. In 1884, Qing China secured concessions in Korea, including the Chinese concession of Incheon. However, pro-Japanese factions in Korea led the Gapsun coup, escalating tensions. Despite a convention for simultaneous troop withdrawal, the First Sino-Japanese War of 1895 ended in disaster for China. The Treaty of Shimonoseki recognized Korea's independence and ceded Taiwan and the Pescadores to Japan. Although the terms could have been harsher, international outcry over the attack on Li Hongzhang by a Japanese citizen led to a revision of some terms. The Liaodong Peninsula was originally ceded to Japan, but Russia, Germany, and France intervened in what became known as the Triple Intervention, pressuring Japan to abandon the peninsula. During this tumultuous period, Empress Dowager Cixi, who had entered the imperial palace in the 1850s as a concubine, emerged as a central figure in state affairs. She became a powerful regent in 1861 after her young son, the Tungji Emperor, ascended the throne. She, along with Empress Dowager Qian and Prince Gong, orchestrated a coup to replace several regions for the boy emperor. After the Tungji emperor's death in 1875, Qixi's nephew, the Guangxu emperor, assumed the throne, leading to another regency under Qixi. From 1889 to 1898, Guangxu ruled independently while Qixi lived in semi-retirement at the Summer Palace. However, events in 1897, including the murder of 2 German missionaries and the subsequent German occupation of Jiaozhou Bay, triggered a scramble for concessions by other powers. The Guangxu emperor attempted to address these external pressures through the 100 Days Reform in 1898, enlisting reformers like Kang Yue to revamp the bureaucracy, education system, and official appointments. The reforms faced fierce opposition from entrenched bureaucrats. Despite Qixi's initial support for reform, she ultimately intervened to halt the changes, arrest and execute several reformers, and regain control over policy. Many reform goals persisted, however. The combination of droughts, imperialist pressures, and Qing instability led to the Boxer Rebellion in 1900. The Boxers, local groups supporting the Qing, targeted foreign missionaries and Chinese Christians, eventually laying siege to Beijing's foreign legation quarter. The Eight-Nation Alliance, a coalition of European, Japanese, and Russian forces, intervened militarily, leading to the fall of Beijing. Empress Dowager Qixi fled to Shen as the Allies enforced their demands through the Boxer Protocol, which included compensation for the invasion costs and the execution of complicit officials. And the defeat by Japan in 1895 shook the Qing Dynasty to its core. The failure of the 1898 reforms and the Boxer Rebellion in 1900 only deepened the sense of crisis. In response, Empress Dowager Qixi in 1901 sought to appease the foreign powers and address the mounting internal pressures by launching a series of reforms known as the New Policies or the Late Qing Reforms. These reforms aimed to overhaul various aspects of Chinese society. One of the most significant changes was the abolition of the imperial examinations in 1905, which had been a cornerstone of the Chinese bureaucratic system for centuries. Alongside educational reforms, there were also efforts to reform the judicial and fiscal systems. The Qing court even took steps toward drafting a constitution and held provincial elections, which were a first in Chinese history. Meanwhile, debates about China's future were intensifying. Sun Yat-sen, a prominent revolutionary, clashed with reform-minded officials and constitutional monarchists like Kang Yue and Liang Qichao. The central issue was how to transform the Manchu-ruled empire into a modern Chinese state. The political landscape shifted dramatically when the Guangxu emperor died on November 14, 1908, and Empress Dowager Qixi passed away the following day. With their deaths, the young Puyi, the son of Xiafeng, Prince Chun, and the nephew of the childless Guangxu emperor, was named as the new emperor at just 2 years old. Xiafeng assumed the role of regent. Xiafeng quickly took steps to stabilize the government, including forcing Yuan Shikai to resign. On May 8, 1911, the Qing Dynasty was officially restructured into a constitutional monarchy, with Xiafeng appointing a responsible cabinet, led by Yi Kuang, Prince Qing. However, this cabinet was dubbed the Royal Cabinet, since 5 of its 13 members were from the imperial family or close relatives. The real turning point came on October 10, 1911, with the Wuchang Uprising. This uprising sparked a wave of revolts across China, and by November, 14 out of 22 provinces had renounced Qing rule. The revolutionaries established the Republic of China in Nanjing on January 1, 1912, with Sun Yat-sen as the provisional president. Facing mounting pressure, the Qing court sought to bring Yuan Shikai back into power. Yuan's Beiyang army defeated the revolutionaries at the Battle of Yangtze in Wuhan. He then assumed the role of prime minister and created his own government with support from Empress Dowager Longyu. Yet, Yuan Shikai ultimately chose to align himself with the revolutionaries to bring down the Qing dynasty. On February 12, 1912, Empress Dowager Longyu issued the abdication decree for the young Emperor Puyi, marking the official end of the Qing Dynasty and over 2,000 years of imperial rule. This transition ushered in a period of instability and upheaval. In July 1917, there was a failed attempt to restore the Qing Dynasty led by Zhang Xun. After his abdication, Puyi continued to live in the Forbidden City until 1924, when he was forced to leave and moved to the Japanese concession in Tianjin. The Empire of Japan then invaded northeast China and established Manchu in 1932, with Puyi installed as its puppet emperor. Manchu existence was cut short when the Soviet Union invaded the region in 1945, leading to the fall of the puppet state and the end of Puyi's brief reign. Thus concluded a chapter in China's long history of imperial rule and set the stage for a new era of modern challenges and transformations.